I never planned to talk about this publicly, but the older I got, the more I realized how important it is to be honest, especially with yourself. For a long time, I couldn't understand why some men my age naturally earned respect from younger women, while others, including myself at certain stages of life, unintentionally created awkwardness. It wasn't about bad intentions, it was about blind spots. And until you face those blind spots, you keep repeating the same mistakes. I grew up believing that maturity alone made you more confident, more appealing, and more grounded. But the truth is far from that. Age doesn't automatically make you wiser. Effort does. And back then, I wasn't making enough of that effort. I behaved in ways that I thought were normal, maybe even polite or impressive, but now I understand how they could be interpreted differently. Sometimes, unintentionally, I gave off a strange vibe, and it took me years to see why. My journey into Stoic philosophy began almost by accident. I picked up a small book of Marcus Aurelius at a time when my life felt confusing and unbalanced. I wasn't looking for deep wisdom, honestly, I just needed something to distract me. But reading his reflections felt like someone finally explaining why I kept stumbling socially. For the first time, I realized that many of my awkward behaviors came from trying too hard to control things I had no right to control. When I think back, the first big mistake I used to make was exactly that, the desire to control the outcome of every conversation. I wasn't trying to manipulate anyone. I simply didn't want to fail. So when I talked to a younger woman, I tried to say the right thing, act the right way, anticipate her reaction before she even gave it. And the result was the opposite of what I hoped. Instead of appearing calm and confident, I came across as tense, overly careful, and sometimes even desperate to be understood correctly. Stoicism taught me one thing I wish I had learned years earlier. People feel your energy long before they understand your words. If your mind is noisy, your behavior becomes noisy too. The more I wanted a conversation to go well, the more awkward I became. I worried about every silence, every facial expression, every shift in tone. I wanted to be liked so badly that I stopped being myself. Looking back, I see how that could appear strange or unsettling. Not because I meant anything inappropriate, simply because I wasn't centered. My inner state was unstable, and instability is something people notice instantly. What helped me break this pattern wasn't a magic phrase or special technique. It was the Stoic principle of focusing only on what is mine to control. My intentions, my tone, my behavior, and my peace. When I finally stopped trying to predict or influence someone else's reaction, conversations became effortless. I felt lighter. And the people around me felt more comfortable, because I wasn't pushing expectations onto them. In this story, I want to share how I changed. Not to present myself as a perfect example, but to show that anyone can transform with honesty and discipline. If my younger self had heard these ideas earlier, he would have saved himself a lot of confusion and uncomfortable moments. So I hope that, wherever you are in life, my experience helps you understand something important about yourself too. The second major realization I had came much later, and honestly, it was harder to accept. For a long time, without even noticing it, I relied too heavily on my past. I believed that the things I had achieved, the experiences I had lived through, the challenges I had survived, all of that somehow gave me an automatic advantage in conversations with younger people. Especially younger women. Not because I felt superior, but because I assumed experience naturally translated into value. But that assumption turned out to be one of the biggest traps I've ever fallen into. I used to bring up old stories, past accomplishments, things I once did well. I thought it made me look interesting, confident, established. And sometimes it did, but only when it came up naturally. Most of the time, I didn't realize how often I used the past as a shield, a shortcut, or even a silent request for recognition. When I look back now, I can see how this could make me seem disconnected from the present moment. Stoicism taught me something deeply humbling. Whatever I did years ago doesn't define who I am today. Virtue, character, and respect are earned in the present, not inherited from the past. I remember one specific moment when this became painfully clear. I was talking to a younger colleague who was sharing her ideas about a project. Instead of listening, I interrupted her to explain how we used to do things when I was her age. I didn't mean to dismiss her perspective. I genuinely thought I was being helpful. But when I saw her expression change, I realized I had made her feel unheard. I had used my age and experience as a way to dominate the conversation without even noticing. That was the moment I understood how dangerous entitlement can be. Not loud entitlement, but the quiet, subtle kind that hides behind good intentions. The kind that whispers, "I know better because I'm older." The kind that convinces you that sharing wisdom is the same as being wise. From a Stoic perspective, this mindset goes against everything the philosophy teaches. The Stoics remind us that humility is one of the pillars of inner strength. A wise person listens more than he speaks. He sees value in every perspective, regardless of age or background. He knows that the world is constantly changing, and he chooses to learn instead of cling to what once was. When I stopped treating conversations like a stage and started treating them like an exchange, everything shifted. I began asking more questions. I became genuinely curious. I stopped assuming that my age automatically gave me a deeper understanding of someone else's life. To my surprise, this made interactions not only more pleasant but also more honest. I no longer felt the pressure to prove myself, and because of that, people felt more comfortable around me. They didn't see a man trying to impress them with old stories. They saw someone present, attentive, and real. The biggest lesson I learned from this phase of my life is simple. Respect isn't something you carry with you. It's something you earn every day through your actions, your attitude, and your openness. The third realization in my journey was the most uncomfortable one, because it forced me to confront something I always believed I was good at: emotional control. I thought I was calm, composed, and stable. But as I began to look honestly at my interactions, I noticed how often my emotions slipped through the cracks. Small reactions that I didn't consider meaningful, but that others certainly noticed. There were moments when a simple misunderstanding would make me tense. Times when a delayed reply made me overthink. Times when I felt insecure without admitting it, and that insecurity showed itself in subtle ways. A sharper tone, a forced joke, a sudden silence. Nothing extreme, nothing dramatic, but enough to shift the atmosphere in the conversation. I didn't realize back then how quickly emotional inconsistency can make people uncomfortable. Even if a man means well, when his mood changes suddenly or he reacts too strongly to something minor, it creates unpredictability. And unpredictability, even in mild forms, never feels safe. Stoicism emphasizes self-mastery as one of the highest virtues. It teaches that while we cannot control everything around us, we can always choose how we respond. But choosing your response requires awareness, and awareness was something I lacked. I remember a moment when this became clear. I was talking with a younger friend, and she made a light-hearted comment I misunderstood. Instead of asking what she meant, I reacted defensively, as if I needed to protect my pride. The shift in my tone was small, but I could see her expression change immediately. It wasn't fear, just concern. And that concern said everything. She didn't know how I was going to react next. That was the moment I realized how important emotional predictability is. When people feel calm around you, they trust you. When they trust you, they open up. And when they open up, connections form naturally. But if your emotions fluctuate too easily, even if unintentionally, people start guarding themselves. The truth is, emotional steadiness has nothing to do with suppressing feelings. It's not about pretending you're made of stone or avoiding vulnerability. Stoicism isn't about being emotionless. It's about understanding your emotions well enough that they don't control you. I began practicing small techniques, pausing before I responded, checking my breathing when I felt irritated, grounding myself when something unexpected happened. These simple habits made a massive difference. They helped me stay centered, no matter the situation. Over time, I noticed something incredible. The calmer I became inside, the calmer the world around me felt. Conversations flowed smoother. People trusted me more. I didn't give off that subtle tension anymore, the tension that makes interactions feel uneasy. Emotional stability doesn't mean perfection. It means presence. It means choosing clarity over impulse, kindness over defensiveness, patience over frustration. And when a man consistently shows this level of groundedness, he becomes someone others feel genuinely safe around. Looking back now, I realize that emotional self-regulation was the missing piece I had been searching for. It's what ties confidence, respect, and connection together. When your inner world is steady, your outer presence becomes naturally strong. Looking back on everything I've shared so far, I realize that personal growth isn't about achieving perfection. It's about recognizing patterns, taking responsibility, and making small, consistent changes. The three pitfalls I've talked about, trying to control outcomes, relying on past achievements, and letting emotions dictate my behavior, were all connected. They stemmed from the same underlying problem. I wasn't fully present, I wasn't fully aware, and I wasn't fully responsible for myself. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It required patience, reflection, and consistent effort. Stoicism became my guide, not because it promised instant results, but because it gave me a framework to understand myself. Every day, I practiced self-awareness, noticing when I was trying to control something I couldn't, recognizing when I was slipping into old patterns of entitlement, and catching moments when my emotions were about to take over. I also learned that true confidence is quiet. It doesn't need to announce itself or demand validation. When I stopped trying to impress people with words or stories, I noticed that they started to respond to my presence differently. People gravitated toward calm, attentive energy. The respect I received was no longer automatic or assumed. It was earned through how I conducted myself in each moment. Another key lesson was listening. Not just hearing words, but really listening with curiosity and empathy. Once I focused on understanding others instead of projecting myself onto them, relationships became richer and more genuine. Conversations stopped feeling like a test, and more like shared experiences. The paradox of Stoicism is that by letting go of control, by releasing attachment to outcomes, and by respecting the present moment, you actually create the strongest influence. I also realized that these principles aren't just about interacting with women. They apply to every connection I have: friends, colleagues, family. Emotional regulation, humility, and presence are universal skills. They don't just make you appear attractive or respectable, they make you a better human being. And that, in the end, is the point. Improving yourself, not to impress others, but to live a life of integrity, calm, and meaning. So if you take anything away from my story, let it be this: focus on your inner world first. Work on your presence, your humility, and your emotional mastery. Treat each interaction as a chance to practice these skills, and you'll notice a difference. Not because you're trying to change anyone else, but because you're changing yourself. And when you do that, respect, connection, and even admiration naturally follow. I hope my journey resonates with you, and that it inspires you to reflect on your own patterns. Remember, growth is a lifelong process. Stay patient, stay aware, and stay committed to being the best version of yourself. Stoicism taught me that inner peace is not a destination, it's a daily practice. And in that practice, I found freedom, confidence, and genuine connection.